I know that. I thought I muted my mic. Hare Krishna.
Hare, oh.
Hare Krishna. Ramananda?
Yes, Guru Maharaj, I am here.
Jivan Mukta Saruchite. So those who are
Krishna. Yes? Okay.
Prabhu, in my
Hare Krishna. Kripa Sindhabevacha Patitana
Anam Pavani.
Pavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Anantakoti Vaishnavindaki Jai. Tonight, barring any major technical difficulties from my side, we're going to have a Kirtan as a group prayer for His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami, who's still in very critical condition in a hospital in Florida. So together we can offer this prayer before we chant. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, dear Sri Shishi Radhamanan Mohan, Shishi Lakshmi Nrsingadev, if you so desire, please help Bhakti Charu Swami heal his body very quickly so that he can go on spreading the Sankirtan movement, giving us his guidance and association. Thank you very much for considering our request. Hare Krishna. And now, if you give me a second, I'm going to try to hook back up to this new technology that I'm getting used to. So please hold for one minute. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. How's that?
Haribo.
Haribo.
Manisha, there's an echo coming from your side.
1 second. All right.
Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Sri Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamine Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Sri Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshataya Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshataya Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Bola Bola
Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda
Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda.
Just a humble request, whenever possible, if you can leave your camera on. It really helps to connect us. Prabhupada too. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare, Hare
Krishna
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Hare Rama. Ramananda. How do I adjust my volume on Jamulus?
Guru Maharaj, can you hear me?
Connection, that's the problem.
আমার এখানে এরকম দেখাচ্ছে
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Does that sound okay?
We can barely hear you.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. No. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Can you hear me now?
We can, but just barely.
Hare Krishna.
Is Hare Krishna, is everybody able to hear Guru Maharaj badly? Because I'm able to hear him properly.
Now we can hear. Before it was not
yes,
very
we
clear.
can hear. I can hear you properly.
Yeah, we can hear loudly. Yes, we can hear loudly.
That's distortion. It's terrible. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Still hear me?
Yes, it's good.
It's good?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. Dear Lord Krishna, please help us. Please help me.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Krishna
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama Hare Everybody, please.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
Gaur Premanande Nitai Gaura Haribo 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo Nitai Gaur Premanande. Hare Krishna. Lucky thing we issued a warning, right? Hare Krishna. Well, hopefully, Krishna will forgive us for all the technical difficulties, which I hope to get adjusted for next time. But thank you very much, everyone, for the sincere prayers for His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami. And gradually, we're getting the band back together here. Hare Krishna. And now we're going to continue with our regular scheduled program of Krishna Katha and the reading of the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. By the way, it's really good to see you all. Hare Krishna. Thanks for making yourselves available. We'll do the Mangala charana, number 2, please. Is everyone okay? Better than okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Prabhu.
Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Adadhana Stridam Danter Idam Dyache Puna Puna Srimad Rupa Padamboja Duli Syam Janma Janmani Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvatutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha Namashreshtam manamapi shachiputram atra swarupam Shri Rupam tasyagrajam urupurim maturim gushtavatim Radha kundam girivadamaho radhika madhavasham Prapto yasya pratitikupaya Shri Gurum tam natosmi Hey Guru Gyanada Dina Bandho Swananda Data Kurunaika Sindo Vrindavana Sinahita Avatar Prasita Radha Pranaya Prachara Hey Dina Bandho Kurunaika Sindo Kuru Prasadam Mai Mandamudhe Laksha Paradhe Bahupapa Gadhe Tatpada Padme Stumatishta Krishne Pratur Shriman Navadvipe Dvi Netram Dvi Bhujam Gurum Barabhaya Pradam Shantam Smaritan Navapurvakam Tvam Gopika Visharaves Tanayanti Kesi Sevari Karini Guru Nijapada Padme Dasyam Pradaya Kurumam Vrajakanane Shri Radhangri Sevana Rase Sukinim Sakabdao Shri Guru Paramananda Premananda Palaprad Prajananda Pradhananda Sevayam Manayojaya Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Tinamine Shri Barshabana Videvi Dayataya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayane Pravave Namaha Madhuryojwala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Virudhapa Siddhanta Dvanta Harine Namo Gaurakishoraya Sakshad Vairagya Murtaye Vipralamba Rasambodhe Padambu Jayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sakchirananda Namine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gaura Virbhava Bhomestvam Nirdeshta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Shri Jagannathayate Namaha Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Namo Mahavaranyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Goratvishe Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayatam Suratau Pangor Mama Manda Matergati Matsarvaswapadambo Jau Radha Manana Mohanao Divya Vrindaranya Kalpadrumada Srimad Ratnagara Singhasanastao Srimad Radha Shila Govinda Devao Preshtali Bi Sevya Manus Marami Srimad Rasarasaram Bivam Shivatatastita Karshan Venu Swanir Gopir Gopinatha Shriyestunaha 18 Thakur Godiyake Kariyachina Atmasad 18 Nera Charan Vandon Tine Mornad Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vande Nanda Vardashrinam Padarinum Abhikshnasha Yasam Hari Gato Gitam Punati Bhuvanatrayam Hantayam Adra Abala Haridasa Varyo Yadrama Krishna Chanarasparasha Pramoda Manam tanoti sahago ganayos tayoryat. Paniya suyavasakanna kanna mulai. Vrindayai tulsi devyai priyayai keshavasya cha Vishnu bhakti pradidevi satyavachai namo namaha. Shri Nishinga Jai Nishinga Jai Jai Nishinga Pralada Desha Jaya Padma Mukha Padma Bringa Yada Yada Hi Dharmasya Glanir Bhavati Bharata Abhutanam Adharmasya Tadatmanam Srajamyaham Paritranaya Sadhunam Vinashaya Chadushkritam Dharmasam Stapanartaya Sambhavami Yuge Yuge Manmara Bhavamad Bhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru Mami Vaishyasi Yuktvaivam Atmanam Atparayanaha Sarvadharman Parityaja Mamekam Sharanam Braja Ahang Tvam Sarva Papebhyo Mukshayishami Ma Shuchaha Shushusho Shudadhanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Syan Mahat Sevaya Vipra Punya Tirtha Nishevanad Shinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridyantaksto Hyapadrani Vidhunoti Suhritsatam Nashta Praeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyutama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Tadarajastamo Bhava Kamalobhadayaschaye Chetaiter Anavhitam Stitam Sattve Prasidati Evang prasanna manaso bhagavad bhakti yogataha bhagavad tattva vijnana mukta sangasya jayate vidyate hridaya grantischijante sarva sangshaya shiyante chasya karmani drishta evatmanishvare Malihai kareshe bijarupan shravana kirtana jale kareshe chan Tahan vistarita hai pale prema pal ihan male sheche nitya shravanadi jal. Vairagya vidya nija bhakti yoga shiksharta meka purusha purana Shri Krishna chaitanya sharira dhari kripam budhir yastamaham prapadye. Kala nashtam bhakti yogam nijam ja pradush kartum Krishna chaitanya nama Avarbhutastasya padarivinde gadam gadham liyatam chitabringa Ajanulambita bujau kanakavadato samkirtanai kapitaro kamalaya takshao Vishwambarao dvijavarao yugadharma palo vande jagapriyakaro karunavataro Chaitanya Krishna Chaitanya Gaurango Dvijanayaka Yatinam Dandinam Chaiva Nyasinam Chasharomani Rakdambara Darashriman Navadvipa Sudakara Prema Bhakti Padaschaiva Shri Shachinandanastata Nityananda Vidurdendur Vasuda Pranabalaba Janavi Jivitapati Krishna Prema Prada Prabhu Padmavati Sutta Shriman Shachinandana Purvaja Bhavon Mato Jagatrata Rakta Gaura Kalevaram Matsamo Nasti Papa Manaparadi Chakashana Parihare Pilajame Kimbruve Purushottama Yuvatinam Yata Yuni Yunam Chayuvatau Yata Mano Piramate Tadvan Mano Mera Matam Twayi Pumauskalita paranam pumir eva valambanam twai-jata paradhanam twameva sharanam prabho Govinda balabhe radhe prarte twamaham sada twadiyam iti janatu govindo mam twaya saha Radhe vrindavanadi she karunamritavahani kripaya nijapadabja dasyam mayam pradiyatam Nitai namine che namirhate sharamudyanam tite chere. Nitai namine che namirhate sharamudyanam tite chere. Nitai namine che namirhate shadhamulyanam dite chere. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita. We're taking up at the Adi Lila chapter 2. We're on text number 26. Why don't you put in the other Romanized Bengali? Please. Upasana Bede Jani Jnana Yoga Marge Tar Bhaje Jay Shab Rama Atma Rupe Tare Kare Anubhav. Those who walk the paths of knowledge and yoga worship him only, for it is him they perceive as the impersonal Brahman and localized Paramatma. Purport. Those who are fond of mental speculation, Jnana Marg, or want to meditate in mystic yoga to find the absolute truth, must approach the impersonal effulgence of the Lord and his partial representation respectively. Should be respectful also. Such persons cannot realize the eternal form of the Lord. So this is an important theme throughout the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, in which Krishna mentions Yeyata mam prapadyante tamstataiva bhajamyaham mama vartmanavartante manusha partasarvashaha. As one approaches me, Krishna says, I reward him accordingly. And elsewhere we find that those who are fond of mental speculation, as mentioned here, Itam satam brahma sukhanubhutya dasyam gatanam paradaivatena mayashitanam naradarakena sakam vrijarukrita punya punjaha. As is mentioned by Shukadev Goswami, that there are people who realize different aspects of Krishna, and it has to do with their perspective. For instance, itam satam brahma sakhanubhutya. There are those who only realize the Brahman effulgence because they're on the Jnana Marg. And dasyam gatanam paradaivatena. They see the Supreme as the Lord of Vaikuntha because they have that mood. And then there are those mayashritanam naradarakena. They see the Supreme Personality of Godhead as being material, because that's their mentality. Sakamvrjarukrita punya punja, but then he mentions that there are those who are like the cowherd boys who are playing with Krishna as a personal friend. So it has to do with the devotee. And when the devotee has come in contact, when a person comes in contact with pure devotees and imbibes the mood of the pure devotees and follows in their footsteps, then such a person will develop the predisposition to the path of devotion, and Krishna then responds in kind, reveals himself to such a person as the personality of Godhead. 27. Upasana Bede Jani Ishvara Mahima Ataiva Suryatara Dayita Upama. Thus one may understand the glories of the Lord through different modes of worship, as the example of the sun illustrates. She Narayana Krishnera Swarup Abed. Ak I Vigraha Kintu Akara Bibed. Narayan and Sri Krishna are the same personality of Godhead, but although they are identical, their bodily features are different. In hotta dvibhuja tiho dhare chari hata iho venu dhare tiho chakra dika sata. This personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, has 2 hands and holds a flute, whereas the other Narayan has 4 hands with conch, wheel, mace, and lotus. Purport. Narayan is identical to Sri Krishna. They are in fact the same person manifested differently, like a high court judge who is differently situated in his office and at home. As Narayan, the Lord is manifested with 4 hands, but as Krishna, he is manifested with 2 hands. Narayanas tvam nahi sarva dehinam atmas yadik sha akila loka sakshi Narayanongam narabhu jalayanat tachapi satyam na tavaiva maya. O Lord of Lords, you are the seer of all creation. You are indeed everyone's dearest life. Are you not therefore my father, Narayana? Narayan refers to one whose abode is in the water born from Nara, Garbhodakshai Vishnu. And that Narayana is your plenary portion. All your plenary portions are transcendental, they are absolute, and are not creations of Maya. Purport. This statement, which is from Srimad-bhagavatam 10.14.14, was spoken by Lord Brahma in his prayers to Lord Krishna after the Lord had defeated him by displaying his mystic powers. Brahma had tried to test Lord Krishna to see if he were really the Supreme Personality of Godhead playing as a cowherd boy. Brahma stole all the other boys and calves from the pasturing grounds, but when he returned to the pastures, he saw that all the boys and calves were still there, for Lord Krishna had created them all again. When Brahma saw this mystic power of Lord Krishna's, he admitted defeat and offered prayers to the Lord, addressing him as the proprietor and seer of everything in the creation, and as the supersoul who is within each and every living entity and is dear to all. That Lord Krishna is Narayan, the father of Brahma, because Lord Krishna's plenary expansion, Garbhodakshai Vishnu, after placing himself on the Garbha ocean, created Brahma from his own body. Mahavishnu in the causal ocean is, and Kshirodakshai Vishnu, the supersoul in everyone's heart, are also transcendental expansions of the Supreme Truth. So if you go to the link in the chat box, is ISV library. That will take you to a very sleek interface upon which you can enter questions, reflections, a power phrase, or an analogy. And then it shows up on the spreadsheet that I'm looking at, so I could see the questions and so forth. And you can do it at any time.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Yes. Prabhu, I have a question. In the previous verse, it is said that Narayana is identical to Sri Krishna. Only the number of hands and what he holds is different. But here it is said that he is an expansion and the 3 Vishnus are expansions. So there is always this confusion of is this identical doesn't mean they are equal? How do we understand the word identical? Because if they are the same, then why the gradations of their lokas are different? How do we understand that?
Well, God is one. Advaya Gyan Tattva. Vadanti tat tattva viras tattvam yaj jnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdite. But he manifests himself variously. And the ways that he manifests himself are primarily to accommodate his various devotees. And so, for instance, the Lord appears as Narayan in Vaikuntha for those who want to worship him in awe and reverence, and in Goloka Vrindavan for those devotees who hanker to worship him in a more familiar mood. This unceremonious love, no special rules and regulations. Narayan is an expansion, but Lord Brahma notes in his Brahma Samhita, departure eva hita shantanamabhyupetya, dipayate vrivata hetu samana dharma, yastadrageva hicha vishnu chaya vibhati, govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. You have an original candle, and that candle lights other candles. They have the same power because they're all God, but there is one original candle. And then, of course, from the point of view of the qualities of Krishna or rasa, then Rupa Goswami points out that Krishna has more qualities than Lord Narayan in his original form, in which he accommodates the kind of loving service that devotees hanker for when they follow the rag marg. Then he has the qualities of unparalleled beauty. He plays the flute. He's surrounded by numerous devotees endowed with pure love for God. And he has amazing pastimes, especially his childhood pastimes. You don't see childhood pastimes of Lord Narayana. And therefore, from that point of view, from the point of view of rasa, he has more qualities, but he's the same person, no difference, but just different moods and manifestations. And you find that those particular forms of Krishna are brought out by the devotion of his devotees. For instance, as the example will be given here soon. Sorry, spoiler alert, if you don't want to know what's going to happen in a few verses. Kaviraj Goswami describes the way in which, when the gopis were looking for Krishna in Vrindavan, and then Krishna was trying to hide from them, he manifested his Narayan form. And the gopis running through the forest looking for Krishna, and then they saw Narayan, they said, oh, yeah, Narayan, okay. And they offered their obeisances, have you seen Krishna? And they ran off. Of course, when Srimati Radharani was nearby, then he could barely maintain his form as Narayan, but manifested his other form. That happens also in the Srimad-bhagavatam when Gopakumar goes to Vaikuntha. He's a coward boy. He's meant for Goloka, but when he's in Vaikuntha trying to find his way, he's being taken by his mantra to various realms. And he sees Lord Narayan. He has so much of that spontaneous mood that Lord Narayan can hardly keep the 4 arms. He keeps manifesting 2 arms and then coming back to 4 because of the love of his devotee there. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Okay, let's look at a couple more verses. Shishu Vatsa Hari Brahmakari Aparada Shamaite Magena Prasada. After Brahma had offended Krishna by stealing his playmates and calves, he begged the Lord's pardon for his offensive act and prayed for the Lord's mercy. Tomor nabi padma hoite amar jamodai. Tumi pita mata ami tomar tanai. I took birth from the lotus that grew from your navel. Thus you are both my father and mother, and I am your son. Pita mata balakera na loy aparadha sham more karaha prasada. Parents never take seriously the offenses of their children. I therefore beg your pardon and ask for your benediction. Krishna kahena brahma tomar pitta narayana ami gopa tumi kaiche amaranandana. Shri Krishna said, O Brahma, your father is Narayan. I am but a cowherd boy. How can you be my son? Brahma balena tumi ki na hao Narayan, tumi Narayan shuno tahar karano. Brahma replied, are you not Narayan? You are certainly Narayan. Please listen as I state the proofs. Prakrita shrishte jatta jiva rup tahar je atma tumi mula swarup. All the living beings within the material world and spiritual worlds are ultimately born of you, for you are the supersoul of them all. Purport: the cosmic manifestation is generated by the interaction of the three modes of material nature. The transcendental world has no such material modes, although it is nevertheless full of spiritual variegatedness. In that spiritual world, there are also innumerable living entities who are eternally liberated souls engaged in transcendental loving service to Lord Krishna. The conditioned souls who remain within the material cosmic creation are subjected to the threefold miseries of pangs of material nature. They exist in different species of life because they are eternally averse to transcendental loving devotion to the Supreme Lord. Sankirtana is the original source of all living entities because they are all expansions of his marginal potency. Some of them are conditioned by material nature, whereas others are under the protection of the spiritual nature. The material nature is a conditional manifestation of spiritual nature, just as smoke is a conditional stage of fire. Smoke is dependent on fire, but in the blazing fire, there's no place for smoke. Smoke disturbs, but fire serves. The serving spirit of the residents of the transcendental world is displayed in 5 varieties of relationships with the Supreme Lord, who is a central enjoyer. In the material world, everyone is a self-centered enjoyer of mundane happiness and distress. One considers himself the Lord of everything and tries to enjoy the illusory energy, but he is not successful because he is not independent. He is but a minute particle of the energy of Lord Sankirtana. All living beings exist under the control of the Supreme Lord, who is therefore called Narayan. So this is the problem in the material world, as described by Havi Yogendra, Bhakti Parishanu Bhavu Viraktiranyata Traishatrika Ekakala. Excuse me, I'm sorry. He says, it's a nearby verse, that's why. He says that Bhayam Dvitiya Binibeshatasyad Ishad Ape Tasya Viparyayosmiti. And that is the living entities in the material world have it all wrong. They think that they are the competitor of the Supreme Lord, and they try to lord it over material nature. And because of that, apetasya viparyosmriti, their intelligence is wrong. It's turned in the wrong direction. And the result they get from that is bhayam, fear, because they're competing against the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that's not possible. They're also seeing that there's 2 things. But there's only one thing, Advaya Gyan Tattva. There's one truth, it's all God. And he's in various manifestations, but they see a second thing. And when you see anything that's not related to Krishna, then it's a very fearful, dark situation. And this is what Krishna told Brahma at the beginning of creation, Ratertam yat pratyeta na pratyeta chatmani tadvidyadatmano mayam yata bhaso yata tamaha. Anything you see that's separate in vision from me is my illusory energy. It's a reflection that appears to be in darkness. Wait, I'm still looking at the purport. There's a lot in here. First of all, pangs. That's not a good thing. You want to look up the word pang? Pang. A sudden sharp pain or painful emotion. It's from the mid-16th century, origin unknown. So the pangs of material existence, go back please. Actually, Prabhupada in a lecture says that you can expect suffering, you should expect suffering at every moment. The material nature is relentless. Adhyatmika, adhibhautika, and adhidaivika miseries come like waves of the ocean. They never stop. The three modes of material nature, hlada, tapa, traya, they cause us unlimited misery. Whereas in the spiritual world, the hladini, sandini, and samvit potencies are the source of spiritual substance and knowledge and bliss. But when translated here in the material world, because of the perverted consciousness I mentioned, viparyo smriti, it's manifest in a way that is miserable for us. And the things that should be pleasurable actually cause more misery. We get the opposite of what we were hoping for. So we're going in the wrong direction. Kautukarnava, Prabhu gives this analogy, recounts, material nature is a conditional manifestation of spiritual nature, just as smoke is a conditional stage of fire. Smoke is dependent on fire, but in blazing fire, there is no place for smoke. And also, as we heard, smoke disturbs, but it never serves. So the material modes of passion, especially as described also in the Bhagavatam in this way, Partivad dharano dumas tasmaragnis trayi mayaha tamasastu rajastasmat sattvam yad brahmadarshanam. From the mode of goodness, at least you can see Brahman. But from the mode of passion, it's like smoke. It just disturbs and never actually gives us what we want. And then we have from Krishna. Krishna Prabhu says, we all have strong inclination to enjoy all the time, as per Anandamayo Bhyasat. But there is no real enjoyment in this material world. Why we have this inclination if it is not possible to enjoy here? Well, we have the inclination because that's our nature. We're part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's the supreme enjoyer, and our constitutional position is to enjoy in cooperation with him. We just took a wrong turn. So it's an illusory type of enjoyment here in the material world, because the material world is a reflection of the spiritual world. And Prabhupada points this out at the end of the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita when he says that in order to advance in spiritual life, one should overcome weakness of heart. And then he says that how to overcome weakness of heart is described in the first several verses of the 15th chapter. And those verses, as you know well, describe how the material world is a reflection of the spiritual world. So there's a mistake being made by the living entity in the material world, thinking the reflection is reality, but it's not. So that's why it appears that we should enjoy. It's a mirage. It doesn't mean that real enjoyment isn't there. Just like if you get a counterfeit $100 bill, Manisha, what does it mean in the context of this conversation?
It means that like it's not very useful. Or
Okay. It may not be useful. What else? If you get a counterfeit $100 bill, what else does it mean? Somebody else can say.
It seems like real, but it isn't.
I know it seems like real. That's what counterfeit means. You're just recounting the definition of counterfeit. But what does it mean, Ananda Murari Prabhu?
You won't be able
You
to
don't
buy
got any
anything.
money.
What? Huh?
You will be disappointed if you try to, find happiness with that. He'll be disappointed.
Means a real $100 bill exists somewhere.
Thank you, sir.
Hare
You
Krishna.
should win a $100 bill and not a counterfeit one. It means that there's a real one somewhere else. That's the meaning of counterfeit. How you can't have counterfeit without having real somewhere else. So mirage means it's a reflection of something. Just like Prahlad Maharaj asked this question, Kutra Shisha Shruti Sukham Mrigatrishni Rupa. He says, where is the happiness in the material world? He said, you only hear about it. And he says that it's Mrigatrishni Rupa. It's the form of a mirage, like the deer run after it in the desert thinking it looks like water. Thinking that it is water, but it's fake water. So happiness is unquestionably there. It's just that we have to orient ourselves towards the real happiness. And Sukeshwari says, should we understand that material modes and spiritual modes are some way connected? Yes, you should, because they are. Everything in the material world is a reflection of the spiritual world. So the qualities of the spiritual world, as I mentioned, Sandhini, Samvit, Hladini, are translated into the modes of material nature in this world as Rajas, Tamas, Sattva. And they give the opposite result. Jiva Goswami writes, Hlada Tapatraya. What is the source of happiness, bliss, knowledge in the spiritual world becomes the opposite here, which is entangling, unhappiness, nirananda, no bliss, and the sense that my existence is going to end. And the things that look like they should give happiness, they give a lot of distress. We were walking by a mother with her kids. Apparently one of them rode his bicycle quite recklessly, and she was yelling, she was scolding him quite strongly, and she's saying, "You're in for a world of hurt." And the little jiva is in for a world of hurt here in the material world because of the opposite effect that you get from the energy here, which is contaminated by the mode of ignorance. And Apara Gaurangi says, can you explain more about how material world is the conditional manifestation of the spiritual nature? It's conditional because of the consciousness. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Aparayam itastvanyam prakritim vidi me param jiva bhutam mahabahoya yedam dharyate jagat. And that is that the material nature is being molded around the spiritual or para living entities. They're para energies. They're superior to the matter that he lists in the previous verse, earth, water, fire, air, and so forth. And matter is manifesting in various ways according to the varied consciousness of the living entities. This is how the material manifestations are being created, and they assume various combinations and permutations. It's because of the projected consciousness of the living entities here in this world who are manipulating the energy. We're very powerful. because we're superior to the material nature. At the same time, the material nature, in a macro sense, is controlled by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just a minute ago, when I was fiddling around with Jamulus trying to get it to work properly, I was thinking, and there were so many anomalies that came out. Well, we'll get it right one of these times. And I was thinking, what a detailed technology the demigods have to run this whole material world. I mean, just a little thing like getting our voices to sync up from a distance is very difficult. It takes a lot of special equipment. But everything in this world is working in such a automatic way, and there's an arrangement. For instance, I'm talking now, I'm moving my hands, and it just happens naturally because it's being controlled by higher power. I'm just saying, move my hand, and it goes like that instantly. So I start thinking I'm doing it. And it's actually being controlled. So the conditional manifestation of spiritual nature means when one looks over the energy and thinks that I'll enjoy it. And the opposite is true. As Prabhupada mentions, if you can look Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagnau Brahmano Hutam Brahmaiva Tena Gantavya Brahmakarma Samadhina. Shraddha's giving you the verse number in about 2 seconds. And that, in that verse, Krishna says that anything that you use in the service of the Supreme changes its nature. So the material nature, when engaged properly through yukta vairagya, it's reconnected to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir.
424, 4.24.
4.24, please. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. We're going to have a Veda-based Olympics to see who can get to verses faster. Okay, if you'll look at the purport, Prabhupada writes, how activities in Krishna consciousness can lead one ultimately to the spiritual goal is described here. There are various activities in Krishna consciousness, and all of them will be described in the following verses. But for the present, just the principle of Krishna consciousness is described. A conditioned soul entangled in material contamination is sure to act in the material atmosphere, and yet he has to get out of such an environment. The process by which the conditioned soul can get out of the material atmosphere is Krishna consciousness. For example, a patient who is suffering from a disorder of the bowels due to overindulgence in milk products is cured by another milk product, namely curds. The materially absorbed conditioned soul can be cured by Krishna consciousness as set forth here in the Gita. This process is generally known as yajna, or activities, sacrifices, simply meant for the satisfaction of Vishnu or Krishna. The more the activities of the material world are performed in Krishna consciousness or for Vishnu only, the more the atmosphere becomes spiritualized by complete absorption. The word Brahman, means spiritual. The Lord is spiritual, and the rays of his transcendental body are called Brahmajyotir, his spiritual effulgence. Everything that exists is situated in that Brahmajyotir, but when the Jyotir is covered by illusion, maya, or sense gratification, it is called material. This material veil can be removed at once by Krishna consciousness. Thus, the offering for the sake of Krishna consciousness, the consuming agent of such an offering or contribution, the process of consumption, the contributor of the results are all combined together Brahman, or the Supreme Absolute Truth. The Absolute Truth covered by Maya is called matter. There's your Mahavakya power statement of the day. Mayank knows. The Absolute covered by Maya is called matter. You can take that to the bank. Matter dovetailed for the cause of the absolute truth regains its spiritual quality. Krishna consciousness is the process of converting the illusory consciousness into Brahman, or the Supreme. When the mind is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, it is said to be in samadhi, or trance. Anything done in such transcendental consciousness is called yajna, or sacrifice for the absolute. In that condition of spiritual consciousness, the contributor, the contribution, the consumption, the performer or leader of the performance, and the result or ultimate gain, everything becomes one in the absolute, the Supreme Brahman. That is the method of Krishna consciousness. Apara Gaurangi, did that answer your question to some degree?
Yes, thank you so much.
All right, okay, good. What did you all think of that purport?
Very nice.
Too much nice.
Rich
What?
from material
The key to success.
It was too much nice. Okay, let's see. We've got Ashraya Madhava Prabhu says, there will be temporary happiness until we know it is counterfeit. That's why knowledge is important. In the Gita, Krishna talks about the importance of getting knowledge, and he says, does he in the 4th chapter of the Gita? He describes the process of transcendental knowledge. First of all, he says, Yatai Damsi, this is 437, Yatai Damsi Samidognir Bhasmasat Kurutera Juna, Gyanagni Sarvakarmani Bhasmasat Kurutera Tata. As a blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, O Arjuna, so does the fire of knowledge burn to ashes all reactions to material activities. So this transcendental knowledge is really important. And then he says, in this world there's nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism, and one who has become accomplished in the practice of devotional service enjoys this knowledge within himself in due course of time.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes.
I had a question on the previous purport that we just read.
Yes.
I got a little confused. The absolute truth covered with Maya is matter. And that completely confused me because of my lack of understanding. My understanding is Krishna is absolute truth and not the Atma, number one. The Paramatma or Krishna. So, and Krishna can never be covered with Maya. That is whole Mayavadi philosophy otherwise. And the matter anyway we say is the third energy, right? Not the marginal potency, not the internal potency, but the external potency. So please help me understand the purport in the right context. Thank you.
All the products of the sun are emanations from the sun, or the creations of the sun, including the absence of light. When it's blocked out, you call it darkness, but what is darkness? It's the absolute absence of light. And all other manifestations that grow out of the sun, for instance, when the sun hits the ocean and there's a temperature differential in the air, then there's fog, especially over where Satyadev Prabhu lives. It gets hot in the valley here, and then the fog comes up, and then you may be in a situation where you think, oh, it's very gloomy and dark. And that's a product of the sun also, because without the sun rays, it wouldn't be manifested. So there's the sun, and then there's all the manifestations of the sun that take place because of it, because of its power. So in a similar way, the Supreme Absolute Truth is there, and he has multifarious energies. Esha desha stitasyagner jochna vistarani yata. Parasya brahmana shaktis tatedam akilam jagat. Although, just as, this is the Vishnu Purana quoted by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Sanatana Goswami, just as the sun is in one place, but it manifests its energies unlimitedly in varieties all over the universe. So in the similar way, Krishna is one, he's in one place, but he manifests himself variously, but it's all coming from the same absolute source, even though there's varieties of energy. So there's fog in the material world, but that's a product of the sun because of the way that it interacts with other energies. So living entities are not dull stones. They have creative power, and they also have free will. And when they misdirect their conscious energy, it creates all kinds of varieties. And one of the varieties is that it creates this low energy because of their ignorance of God. Like, if you ever noticed when you're around somebody that has bad consciousness, it pervades the whole atmosphere. Ever been around somebody that has a bad intention or has is manifesting something that disturbs everybody else around them? So the lower energy gets manipulated by the higher energy or of the living entity. And the way that we interact with it makes a difference. So when we reconnect those energies, our intention is to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we perform sacrifice, then the atmosphere around us changes as well. The external world is a manifestation of spirit. It's not the other way around. If you change, then your environment will change. If you change your consciousness, then everything around you changes as well. Devotees don't live in the same world as everybody else, because as said by Lord Shiva, Narayana parak sarvena kutaschana bhibyati swarga pavarga narakeshu apitulyarta darshina. Why is it that the hell and heaven is tulya? It's the same to a devotee. Because his consciousness, he's seeing, oh, it's all part of Krishna. He doesn't discriminate high, low, as he sees it's all for service. Now you see in this material world how the energy is transformable. Like if you take a material example like an iron rod, you put it in fire, it actually transforms into fire. When we install the deity, everybody knows the deity's made of stone or made out of metal or wood, right? But we're not worshiping a piece of wood. We're worshiping Krishna. Why? Because that energy can be transformed. Krishna can transform any of his energies, and he's personally present there in archa form.
Right. Okay.
Why is he personally present there? It's because his devotees want to worship him there. So he manifests himself in a way that they can see him.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
I wanted to share a reflection. I'm really appreciating, because I'm also reading the CC right now. And so it's nice that you're also going through the CC, and I get to, it's kind of like a nice refresher.
Why not? We got nothing else to do, right?
Yeah, it's really nice. I was appreciating that line, the fire or smoke disturbs and fire serves. And then what Prabhupada said before that about how in the blazing fire, there's no space for the smoke. And then I thought of in Bhagavad Gita, 3rd chapter, where Krishna is describing kind of the different variations of lust covering the living entity. And Prabhupada, he makes the analogy he like extends Krishna's analogy further in the purport and says something about how lust is like, because what's the first one? I think as a child's covered by the womb, as the mirror is covered by dust, or as the fire is covered by smoke. So he kind of extends the analogy into that, that if the fire if the smoke is utilized properly, that smoke is like lust. And if smoke is utilized properly, then it can be flamed into a burning fire.
Yes.
And so I was just appreciating, and it was a nice reminder for me, like there's no place for smoke in the blazing fire. So how am I taking my, what are the ways in which I'm bringing my material desires kind of unceremoniously into the realm of devotional service, right? Like it was just a nice kind of check for me of, what material desires am I justifying in devotional service, and remembering that there's really no space for the smoke and the fire. I have to just blaze it into a flame.
Yes. Let's look at your purport. It's 338. It says, Krishna says, as fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of this lust. Prabhupada's purport. There are 3 degrees of covering of the living entity by which his pure consciousness is obscured. It's so interesting about, just in one sentence, it describes the existential situation here in the material world. There are 3 degrees of covering of the living entity by which his pure consciousness is obscured. Obscured. Obscure comes from obscurus, dark. From Latin, obscurus, dark, and from the Indo-European root meaning cover, to obscure. It's just covered over. This covering is but lust under different manifestations, like smoke in the fire, dust on the mirror, and the womb about the embryo. When lust is compared to smoke, it is understood that the fire of the living spark can be a little perceived. In other words, when the living entity exhibits his Krishna consciousness slightly, he may be likened to the fire covered by smoke. Although fire is necessary when there is smoke, there is no overt manifestation of fire in the early stage. This stage is like the beginning of Krishna consciousness. The dust on the mirror refers to a cleansing process of the mirror, of the mind, by so many spiritual methods. The best process is to chant the holy name of the Lord. The embryo covered by the womb is an analogy illustrating a helpless position, for the child in the womb is so helpless that he cannot even move. This stage of living condition can be compared to that of the trees. The trees are also living entities, but they have been put in such a condition of life by such a great exhibition of lust that they are almost void of all consciousness. The covered mirror is compared to the birds and beasts, and the smoke-covered fire is compared to the human being. In the form of a human being, the living entity may revive a little Krishna consciousness. And if he makes further development, the fire of spiritual life can be kindled in the human form of life. By careful handling of the smoke in the fire, fire can be made to blaze. Therefore, the human form of life is a chance for the living entity to escape the entanglement of material existence. In the human form of life, one can conquer the enemy, lust, by cultivation of Krishna consciousness under able guidance. Oh, I like this sentence where he says, by careful handling of the smoke in the fire, fire can be made to blaze. Yes. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about the various levels of consciousness, and he says there's the consciousness that's covered, and then like plants, and then there's the next level above that, animals, where it's restricted. And although they obviously manifest more consciousness, we see more feelings, they relate to us, they relate to their young, and to each other, so forth. But they can't use reasoning very well. They don't walk into a city and then observe the architecture and think, oh, there's a statue and it's maybe a racist symbol or something like that. They don't think like that. Human beings enter into all kinds of symbolism and relate in various ways on a higher intellectual level. So human beings are called budding consciousness because all potential is there in the human form of life, tato brahma jignasa. But human beings with sadhana, with a bona fide practice, are flowering. They actually can open up completely. So it's such an important juncture when it comes to the human form of life to have sadhana. Means that which will take you to the goal. Thanks, Ananda Marai. Good stuff. Okay, then we have Shraddha Devi Dasi, reflection. Another usage of pang is as an adjective, meaning crammed or densely packed. For example, the pantry was pang full of cereals. We'll start using that. We got to bring that back. The material world is pang full of pangs. Yeah, and the chitta, or the consciousness of living being, gets pang full of samskars. And it's so crammed full that it gets dark. Balaram. Who was that? Somebody said something.
Sorry, I had a follow-up question of the earlier question.
Oh, sure.
So, Prabhu, how do we connect the three spiritual modes and the material modes? Like for material modes, we have goodness, passion, and ignorance, where we are talking about, how it affects a living entity and what are different things that they do. But Samvit, Sandhani, and Ladhani is like pressure giving, or you're cognizant of your presence there, and the creativity part. So how do we? How does it correlate, Prabhu? How do we understand that?
They're all energies coming from the Lord, but the material world is a perversion of our original consciousness. The perversion starts with the desire to lord it over. We're servants of Krishna, but when we desire to lord it over, then that perverts the environment. And the whole material world is a perverted environment, and what's normally a pleasure giving becomes a source of suffering because of that perversion. Bhayam dvitiya abhinibheshata syat. Because of being absorbed in that which is maya, or illusory, because of a desire to be separate and to enjoy, or more primarily to lord it over, then I create an adverse situation for myself. And therefore, in that adverse situation, apetasya, I'm turned in the wrong direction. Because of that, becoming a competitor to Krishna, then what normally is pleasure-giving, it gives us great misery. This situation is described in the beginning of the Brahma Samhita in the details of the way the creation starts by materialistic consciousness. As consciousness manifests a matter, just like your body is a manifestation of your consciousness. Because of the varied states of consciousness that you have, you create different bodies. So when we leave this body, yang gyam vapi smaran bhavam tajatyante kalevaram tam tami vaitikonteya sadata bhava bhavita. Krishna says, whatever your consciousness, however you've developed it, whatever shape it's in, you're going to develop, you're going to be accommodated with another shape. Even the subtle body, because of the way we cultivate and the way we associate in this world, it takes us a particular shape. And then that shape manifests outwardly in the material world in different bodies. And the universes are shaped, they're presented in a certain way according to the consciousness of the living entities. Om Bhur Bhuva Swa. There's different realms. These are all realms that are predicated on the consciousness of the living beings. So, Yanti Deva Vrata Devam Pitran Yanti Pratir Vrata Bhutani Yanti Bhuteja Yanti Mam Yajino Pimam. Where attention goes, energy flows. You put your energy, you put your consciousness there, you're going to go there. If you start thinking of focusing on hellish lower mode activities, then you'll just go there. We just are pulled in that direction.
Sorry, one last question. So is there a direct relationship with like mode of goodness is samvit or mode of
Yeah. Yeah.
Which one is connected to which one, Prabhu?
I don't remember right now, but I can
There is a direct
take it as a research, and that'll get marked on this board here because Mayank knows how to mark everything. And then I can look it up later.
Thank you.
Look at that. It's Alex.
Hare Krishna Gurmaharaj, being so
Hare Krishna. Good photo. It's an iconic photo of the age that we'll look back on later and appreciate.
I'll think of you for sure.
Hare Krishna.
I'm curious. I'm sure you have some nice advice about preaching or distributing books to proud people. A lot of times, people come over to the table, and if they have like at least some degree of humility, it's very easy to kind of soften them up even further and kind of open them up by complimenting them and kind of putting them on a higher platform. And it's easy to really kind of get into that zone where you can ask for a donation and they'll be willing to take a book. But I found for more proud people who kind of already have a very high idea of their level of spiritual understanding and stuff, then the more I compliment them, then it seems like the further away they get from actually wanting to take a book because they feel like, yeah, I know everything and all this stuff. And so I'm curious if you tend to take a different angle with those kinds of people who feel like they already know so much, but maybe aren't necessarily Indian body, but have that kind of aura about them.
Well, of course, not everybody will take a book, but I appreciate your trying to close the gap and make sure that more people do when the opportunity's there. And normally the ways of appreciating somebody and not condescending to them opens them up. But there are cases when people are in a mood of knowing they think they know everything. And I can give you anecdotal evidence, and I have a witness who's on the Zoom right now with Shraddha Devi Dasi. We were down in Santa Cruz with a group of devotees. We had a table down there, and she was watching me distribute, and we stopped a man with his daughter. He had an 11-year-old daughter, and he was probably in his 50s or something like that. And he was very proud. He knew everything. Showed him the book. He looked at it for a little while, pontificated about the book, like he knew everything about it. And then when I asked him for a donation, he handed it back, and he went on a tirade, explaining he was angry, that I had asked him, and he said, yeah, this is the pollution of all religion. You just want money. And he was actually preaching to his daughter, and I simply tolerated. And I didn't react. I just stood there because he didn't end it. He just kept talking. So I just tolerated and stayed there. And then he just changed his mind all of a sudden. It was miraculous. Shraddha Devi Dasi, what part did I miss? You saw the whole thing happen.
Yeah. He also was mentioned that Krishna is everywhere. He's there in this light pole, and he pointed out to the lamppost which was there. And then also when you had asked him for money, he had turned to the daughter and said, like, you see, this is what you have to avoid. They will ask you for money in the end, like that. And what I also liked was that he said that, look at you, you're wearing such nice clothes. And what I liked was your answer. You had said, Krishna provides for me. That is it. Yeah.
But he was very averse.
Yes.
And he went on for a long time. And then all of a sudden, because we didn't react, we were just neutral. Then he just changed his mind. And he took the book back from me, handed it to his daughter, and then gave me $5.
$5.
I don't know, Alex. You know, there's so many characters out there, but that the principle that you're applying of respecting people and appreciating them and everything like that is the main principle. And then you get some people that are odd cases, and you can experiment in different ways. But I know anecdotally that's one thing. And I wrote in my book about one that really stuck in my mind at Honolulu, Hawaii. I was there with Satyadev. We were going out on book distribution together. And I met a honeymoon couple, and they said, after I presented the Bhagavatam to them, and they said, we're Christians. We don't believe in this. And also I had asked them for donation, and they said, no, we don't believe in that. We wouldn't give to somebody like you because we don't believe in your cause. You're doing the wrong thing. And I was so respectful to them, and it wasn't artificial. I noticed that about myself. I was thinking that I wasn't disturbed. And it was because of the good association I was in and the kind of morning programs we were having. I was feeling I was buoyed by this sense of happiness. And I told them very genuinely that I just appreciated that they took their valuable time. And I said what an honor it was to meet them. And then we parted ways. And the half hour later, they came back. And they wanted to give a donation. And they did. And just because they felt something that came from my heart. So you could say this or that, but the main thing is if you try to express your goodwill from your heart to people, then maybe they'll come back too. And sometimes they'll come back much later. Like I told the story the other day, when we first started doing our Harinam downtown Palo Alto, there was that gentleman who was always drunk whenever I saw him. He's an Indian. And the first time he saw us and our eyes met, he cursed, vehemently cursed for a while. And then the second time, third time, fourth time, and each time I was just, gestured to him in a really gentle way. And then he started changing. And then one day, I know it was after a couple of years of us doing Harinam there, one day he came up to me and he shook my hand. That was back in the days when we used to be able to shake hands. He came up to me and he shook my hand. And the time after that, he came over and embraced me. And now, whenever I see him over there, he always comes out of his way to come over and offer respects to me and to Harinam Party. And it just, you're being out in public and meeting people, the effect might not be there immediately that they take a book, but what you're getting from your chanting and from your hearing, you can actually pass that on. It's a real thing. It comes from your heart to theirs. And you may not see it immediately, but the effect is always there because it's something that's very powerful and real.
That's very helpful, Guru Maharaj. Thank you very much. Very satisfying.
Okay, Hare Krishna. Good work, Bhakti Alex. Way to go. Balaram says, in our discussion of the living entity in the material world, I had a question regarding our minute independence and Krishna's plan. Of course, Krishna knows everything, and he knows what we will choose with our minute independence. But to me, it doesn't make sense how that is considered independence when our decision is already known. The reason I ask is because I don't understand how Krishna's plan and our minute independence are not contradictory. Well, there's just because Krishna knows what our what we're going to do doesn't mean that we're not independent. to do it. The two are not mutually exclusive. And he organizes the energy according to our plan. Otherwise, the material world is a concession for those who want to pervert their consciousness in a certain way. And so he accommodates, and he accommodates well. There's 8,400,000 species of life. I've been watching the birds out of my yard, and they really are having a lot of fun. I mean, they get to fly around all day and land on trees. They're eating the plums. I can't even get to them in my neighbor's yard. Otherwise, I would if I could. But they're up there looking at me like, hey, you can't get up here. That's just one species. The 8,400,000 that he accommodates us according to our plan, that we want to try this and this and that. And so through the material nature, Saugunamayer Bhaver Bhuta Sukshmendriyatmabi Swan Nirmiteshu Nirvishto Bhukte Bhuteshu Tadgunan, he understands our subtle desire, and then he fulfills it and gives us our plan. I'm just looking at your question again. Of course, Krishna knows everything, and he knows that what we will choose with our minute independence. But to me, it doesn't make sense how that is considered independence when our decision is already known. Yeah, so the two aren't mutually exclusive. Just because he knows doesn't mean that we don't have independence. The reason I ask, because I don't understand how Krishna's plan and our minute independence are not contradictory. Well, that's the answer. Philosophically, there's no problem with that he knows what we are. He still gives us the opportunity and facilitates us. That's the point. Srivatsa gives us reflection. I was thinking about the analogy of smoke and fire and its relationship to bhakti. Pure devotional service is like fire, and it is all about service. However, sometimes there is some disturbance in bhakti that isn't completely pure, and those impurities, such as the desire for mukti, are like smoke. However, as we feed the fire more and more through chanting Krishna's names, Srimad-bhagavatam, and the instructions of the acharyas, the smoke gradually becomes more and more insignificant. Pureha bhuman bhavo piyoginas. Krishna really takes care of you. All I have to do is stay alive in Krishna consciousness, tattenu kampam, and make a sincere endeavor. Bhakti is such a perfect process in any situation. Unlike other processes, it doesn't require any qualifications. Devotional service itself is enough to get over the pangs of material misery and desires that drive me away from Krishna. Bhadyamano pi mad bhakto. Sorry for the long tangent. Pretty good tangents you're coming up with these days, Srivatsa. It's nice. It's really nice. It's true. The only qualification for bhakti is shraddha, and really that shraddha starts with a faith in the bhakti scriptures and in the devotees. And from there, if one has that, then one takes sadhu sangha, and everything manifests from that sadhu sangha. Mayank, absolute truth covered by Maya is called matter. Power phrase, yes. Thank you. Shraddha Devi Dasi, in that condition of spiritual consciousness, the contributor, the contribution, the consumption, the performer or leader of the performance, and the result or ultimate gain, everything becomes one in the absolute, the supreme Brahman. That is the method of Krishna consciousness. What becomes transcendental? The contributor's subtle body, the gross body? What happens when such a person dies? He leaves the subtle body, or no need, since it is already pure. Well, it's mentioned by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and other acharyas as well, that when a person who is embodied takes to the process of devotional service and becomes a pure devotee, then technically the prarabdha karma will be finished. However, Krishna maintains that prarabdha, in order that the person can stay embodied and preach Krishna consciousness. So when you see the body of a completely pure devotee, that body is not prarabdha, it's actually a manifestation of Krishna's mercy. He's maintaining it so that the person can stay in the body, because otherwise it's no longer manifest. The person who takes to Krishna consciousness is described, and the context Prabhupada quotes this verse, Iha yasya harer dasye karmana manasa gira nikila apyavastastu jivan muktasa uchides, liberated in the body. But even if the person isn't 100% pure and is engaged in the process of devotional service, then Mahaprabhu explains to Sanatan and Haridas Thakur in the Antya Lila that such a person has a sadhaka deha and a practitioner's body. It's something like the Acharya is saying that the mango is a mango, whether it's a ripe mango or a green mango. A mango is a mango, because the process is known to be so effective, and that when one's engaged in it, then that unripe mango will become ripe. There's no question about it. That's what Krishna is saying in the Gita when he says, Api chet sudaracharo bhajate mamananya bhak sadhureva samantavya samyag vyavasitoista. So somebody's engaged fully in the process of bhakti, but also you see worldliness in such a person. And Krishna says, even if you see that, you have to know that that person is a sadhu, it's a pure devotee, because they're on the path. And then Shri Pram Bhavati Dharmatma Shashvas Shantim Nagachati Kaunteya Pratijanihi Nami Bhakti Pranashiti says very quickly they'll come to the perfectional stage. Then we have Aprame says, devotees have been quarantining before quarantine. No janasanga. I know, I've been thinking that myself. It's very nice. Ananda Murari, power phrase, by careful handling of the smoke and the fire, fire can be made to blaze. Thank you for putting that in the power phrase box. Aprame, great exhibition of lust, that they are almost void of all consciousness. This line reminded me of Tamisra. In my understanding, our jealousy towards Krishna, being the original Purusha enjoyer, drove us to run helter-skelter in the material world, hunting for sense objects to somehow mimic what Krishna is and what we are not. Yes, this is the sense of our plight in the material world, apitasya viparyo smriti, that we're trying to become a competitor to Krishna. That's the statement of the Bhagavatam that Mahaprabhu brought out. Shukeshwari with a question, direct correlation between spiritual modes and material modes, goodness.
Prabhu, I just wrote that to just do the research later. You just wanted me to add it to the question.
Thank you. You will get Indranuj, all the way from Japan. Question, opposites attract? You were extremely humble, and the very proud man became attracted to that. Yeah, sometimes I remember in the airport, if somebody was hesitating to take a book, we'd pull it back really fast, say, no, you can't have it. I remember one guy, like I was showing a book, and I could see he was hesitating, so I took it back. And sometimes you hold it back from people. And it's funny that one person I was holding back, I said, no, I don't think you're qualified. And he said, what are you talking about when I qualified? Give me that book. You know, if you try to chase them with it, they'll get away from me. But if you hold back a little bit, well, I don't know if I should give this to you. Opposites attract. Okay, then reflection from Tadiya Seva. Just wanted to share reflection. It is so easy to become unhappy and sad in this material world. One foolish thing, one thing done in ignorance, one thing done without knowledge can lead one to unhappiness. This just shows that this material world is full of unhappiness. Yeah, Krishna confirms it. Abrahma bhuvana loka punar avartinojana mamupetya tu konteya punar janma nividyate. And he says, Dukhalaya mashashvatam. It's a place of misery. Okay, Alex and Valentina, we also have the same experience when we were in Chennai on train station. One man was looking on us from the train, and then later on we were going on the next platform and we saw the same man. We were really thinking that he was interested, but he took the book and just immediately threw it, started shouting at us. A lot of people came to see what was going to happen, but after our tolerating for a while, people just kick him out and then took the books from us, and they bought books. Yeah, you get a full education out there on Sankirtan, that's for sure. Meet all kinds of people, and you get to practice what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. Now let's take any, how's everybody doing? You don't have to ask a philosophical question or anything, but let's have some sharing of like how things are going for you in your, it's a 9-inning game. We're in the first inning of the pandemic.
Guru Maharaj, I had a question about the prayers we're doing for Bhakti Maharaj. But my kid was asking me that, these are pure devotees and Krishna's taking care of them, even, whatever may be their state at that time. So why are we, intervening in Krishna's thing? He will take good care of his devotee, right? So why are we praying? And I did explain to him to the best of my ability, but I wanted to hear from you because you always have such a nice way of bringing all the points together.
Well, we need him more than he needs us. And if Krishna's thinking about where to send him next and we scream loud enough, he might just keep him here. Krishna's a person. And I was just talking with some godbrothers about it the other day, and the ways in which, somebody of that stature doesn't suffer in that situation. They're already with Krishna. And it's just a matter of Krishna deciding where to put them. And also in situations like this too, it's an opportunity in relationship with very advanced Vaishnavas, and especially you see with the guru-disciple relationship, for the intensity to grow. As a Prabhupada, devotees noticed that with Prabhupada before he left, that he was bringing the devotees closer. There was such an intimate atmosphere around Prabhupada at that time because they realized then they couldn't live without him. And the Tirobhava, when the spiritual master leaves, is very intense because like the light goes out and then you go like Keshav Maharaj always talks about how he was there with Prabhupada when he left, with the other devotees. And he said as soon as Prabhupada breathed his last, Keshav Maharaj looked down at himself and he realized that everything I am is due to Prabhupada. I don't have, every mood I have, everything I'm wearing, where I live, how I eat, everything, every mantra I chant, it came from him. And then you realize that where this is coming from. And there was that devotees crying out for Prabhupada, please stay with us. And so there's Krishna arranges these kinds of things so we can realize our connection with him and our attachment to him. It's a very heartfelt relationship we have with Krishna and with the spiritual master and with Vaishnavas. I mean, when Ramananda Roy answered Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's question about what's the greatest suffering in this world, I mean, these are not just glib statements. These are real. And he said, there is no other suffering that I know of than a separation from the Vaishnava. I mean, think about that. You think of all the different ways you can suffer in this world. And then he says, there is only one suffering. It's separation from the Vaishnava. So when when any living entity leaves this world, there's a tumult that takes place. Anybody, even a lowly person, because the soul's important and the super soul's there also. So it's a big deal. Souls are consequential. Even the most inconsequential of human beings are living entities. There's especially humans because they're manifesting more conscious. But then when you get into the realm of Vaishnavas, and then you get Vaishnavas that are highly accomplished and on a very high level, when they leave, there's this vacuum that takes place, and it pulls the consciousness of people all over the world. And you start to realize the import of consciousness itself, what to speak of pure consciousness. That's what's consequential in this world and in our lives. It's the consciousness of Krishna and his pure devotees. And so, it's a learning experience. And we all go through it one way or another. So it's part of the process of Krishna consciousness. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord.
Other
Maharaj,
realizations? Yes?
no, I was going to say, when we watch these senior Vaishnavas go through so much pain and suffering, what is our lesson when we look at them? Though we know that they are not really suffering.
They're not suffering. Even Maharaj said before he went into that state, he said, I'm not afraid to leave. In fact, Maharaj, he wasn't interested necessarily in taking these steps.
Yeah.
And then he put it in the hands of the higher, what he considered his authority, said that to let the GBC and senior godbrothers decide, and a group of devotees said, no, please, Maharaj, try everything that you can. He said, okay, if you want me to try, I'll try. I'll do this. But it's not that, he's in a suffering condition, because he's aware he's not his body. And the Bhagavatam says, actually, I found a verse, I have to rediscover it though, but I found a section that mentions that one should not read into the various ways in which Vaishnavas may leave this world. It's not that there's a stereotype way that a Vaishnava has to leave the world. It has to be like this or that or the other way, and say, oh, they must not have been advanced because they did this or something like that. It's not the case. Krishna has all kinds of arrangements for devotees to leave the world. Other realizations, or you want to share about what you're feeling or how your life's going or anything like that?
Yes, Guru Maharaj, this is Radha Kripadas.
Hare
Maharaj,
Krishna.
to what you mentioned right now, actually, it is very soothing, because when I was praying, I was thinking there are, thousands of followers, Maharaj has it, but more importantly, sometimes the faith of a neophyte could be shaken, because he would be like thinking, oh, wait a minute, if you are into this one, and if the person who is so advanced and all one, is entering into this phase, if he cannot protect, what you guys are all doing. So I was honestly worried about that aspect, how to, convince neophyte sometime in such situation to answer that one. But thank you, you responded a little bit on that side.
Prabhupada's body was emaciated. He had, his fingers were all swollen up, and he was, what the doctor said would be, for most people, an extremely painful situation. Prabhupada, was unfazed in that way. He, as you saw from the pictures, he went on translating until practically the end, and so forth. But Prabhupada looked at some of his disciples at that time when he was so emaciated, and he said, don't think that this won't happen to you. And it's so, it's a fallacy to think that we're practicing devotional service so our life can be nice. Oh, how come, I didn't get what I wanted? I didn't get that car I always wanted. Krishna, I don't know, devotional service is not so nice. How come I have to get sick? And, this is a perversion of the idea of what devotional service even is. I mean, devotees are serving the pleasure of Krishna. Practically, they don't mind being cannon fodder for Krishna anyway. Ashli Shiva Padaratam Pinashtumam Adarshanam Marma Hatam Karotuva Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was saying, even if you don't show up, Krishna, I'm going to still keep serving you. Pure devotional service is not dependent on what I get from the situation, including a ceremonious send-off. The devotee is happy to be there in Krishna's service, whatever situation it may be. And the emotion of pure devotional service, Madhavendra Puri was in an invalid situation. Srila Ishvara Puri served his every need in that invalid situation. And these things are arranged by Krishna in different ways to give opportunity. And it's, it's a teaching experience too. It's not that anybody leaves this world in a really fun way. Birth and death, Krishna says in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, verses 8 through 12, he's mentioning there, he says, you should know the evil of birth and death in this material world. It's not nice. Of course, for the pure devotee, it's different because the devotee's with Krishna. I've seen several Vaishnavas leave the world, and Krishna always has some arrangement. With Sudama Prabhu, he was, like some of the early devotees, he was very instrumental in spreading the movement. He went away for some time and, was really entangled in different ways. Of course, Satyadev Prabhu visited his place in downtown San Francisco and saw that the walls were covered with pictures of Prabhupada and Krishna and stuff like that, even though he'd gotten pretty far out. And then he found out he was dying, so the devotees arranged a place for him in Los Angeles. And he came there, and, I was there when he left, and he was absorbed in Krishna consciousness. Krishna made an arrangement for him. So, Vayuranilamamritam atedam vashmantam shariram om krato smara kritam smara krato smara kritam smara. Said, please remember all my sacrifices. Prabhupada writes, you don't have to tell Krishna why you have to remind him. He already knows all your sacrifices. So he's making these arrangements.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you.
If somebody thinks that, I'm not going to die because I'm worshiping Krishna, I put $1 in the hundi, so, I'll just die in my sleep and go to heaven. This is a part of the, it's like Maya. Not like Maya. It's a misunderstanding of what's actually going on here. Any other feelings or thoughts or realizations you want to share?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hi. So I was just realizing how outside there are a lot of people now who feel like they're imprisoned within their own house because of the external situation. But I was marveling at how devotees are finding sanctuary in a much higher place. They're having a higher taste. And I was really deriving inspiration from that and realizing that Krishna consciousness doesn't necessarily depend on our physical location. It really depends on the state of our mind. And sometimes that's hard to understand given the external nature of the world that we're in. But being in the association of devotees and seeing how we've utilized this opportunity to go to different heights has been something that's really inspiring me through this time.
Very good, Priya Kishori, as usual. And, there's an old Buddhist saying, wherever you go, there you are. And so as soon as they started letting people out, I said this the other night, but it's really on my mind, so I'm going to say it again. When this lockdown first started happening, it was beautiful. It was so beautiful. We were going for walks and people were shocked, how could this happen? And we were like, yeah, this is great. Let's look at the world from a different point of view, because it seemed like everyone was screaming, hey, you're wrecking the oceans. You're ruining the ozone. You're killing. There's practically every day there's something in the news about a shooting somewhere. I mean, it's crazy. And then everything gets shut down and people are like, why can't we do what we want to do? It's like, well, look what you're doing. It's insane. And so everyone had to stop for a while and calm down. And we noticed that people are actually going back to a kind of more reasonable type of life, families together. Hey, I have to spend all day with my kids, like, isn't that like human society in some ways? And then, there's a lot of realizations people had. And then after the quietude, and then they let everybody back out again, we walk down near Burlingame, and what are they doing? Same stupid stuff that got us here in the first place. Eating meat. You didn't learn a lesson from that? You kill animals and you do all that stuff, and a virus jumps on board through somebody's nostril, and the next thing you know, it's all over the world. And there's alcohol, there's music that is really tamasic, and it's like, what did you learn? And so wherever you go, there you are. And if you don't reform your consciousness, it doesn't matter where you go, because you're going to be in the same situation because of the state of your consciousness when you get there and on the way there as well. But devotees who can be satisfied with reading Bhagavatam and they're happy to chant Hare Krishna with nobody bothering them, then they're like, great, it's good. That's why everyone needs training to how to be happy. Devotees give thousands of seminars a year of where real happiness comes from. And it doesn't come from a bottle of Coca-Cola or, or being free to run around from one bar to the next. That's not happiness. So it's a lesson that human society can get from the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad-bhagavatam. That's why we go out of our way to distribute them and to try to teach. And people do listen. They listen, they go, yeah, that actually makes more sense in contrast to what I've been going through in life, especially nowadays. People will listen to it. We'll take two more because I don't want to keep you up all night.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, Dandatnams. This is
Hare Krishna, Pranagopika.
So everybody is talking about like a coronavirus, but all these days, Sankirtan virus is like, I'm addicted with Sankirtan virus. So first phase is done, and we are going to second phase. So yeah, and the other thing is, when you mentioned tolerance when you are doing book distribution, so you mentioned in Our Family Business book, page 239, under spiritual blood. So you wrote, by practicing tolerance in the face of these challenges, one gets spiritual realization and advances to higher stage of devotional service. So yeah.
Yes, that was from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who said, when you take the trouble to distribute Krishna consciousness, and in return you get people who disagree with you, who are unpleasant towards you, and so forth, then you're developing spiritual blood for your spiritual body. And you can notice it yourself when you take that austerity to do good for others by distributing Krishna consciousness, and you come in contact with friction, you become stronger, and you become mature, actually. And you notice our kids, they're growing up on Sankirtan. They know stuff that other kids don't know. They know what people's apartments look like because they've been to thousands of them. And they also know how to handle rejection. Kameshwari told me the first time she took kids out and the person slammed the door in their face, they sat down on the playground for a little while and talked about what just happened. Some people never learn that lesson. Okay, one last one.
Yeah, that shall I share one more point, Guru Maharaj?
Please go ahead.
So like you always say, leave a good impression. So that leaving a good impression, like, it's very nice feeling, Guru Maharaj, always. So yeah, actually following all your instructions and keeping in mind this, Our Family Business is like a book, is encyclopedia for Sankirtan.
That's good, Pranagopika. That's really good. You have a good heart, you know that? Well, I'm going to leave a good impression and leave it at that, so I don't keep everybody up too late. I mean, as good as I can at this point. And I thank you very much for joining. It's very heartfelt at these times when we're all hanging our we feel like our lives are hanging in the balance, because how can we live without a Vaishnav? And it's very difficult. It brings us together in a more meaningful way. We think about what we have. We think about how important devotees are to us, and we try to take advantage more, right, of the association we have, because you don't know, there's no guarantee. And we talk about it all the time. We hear about it from Krishna, and then la-di-da, life goes on, and we just think, I'll live, that's fine, but I'll live forever. But it's every second is valuable, and the association of devotees is so precious. So we should take advantage of it and try to appreciate them while we can, and hear from them and glorify them and so forth. Well, thank you very much, everybody. My apologies for any technical difficulties in the Kirtan. I just got a little trained up today by Ramananda Sakha Prabhu how to do the Jamulus, but there's a few inconsistencies, I think, in the equipment and software from my side. But we're going to get that together, because whatever it takes to have a rip-roaring Kirtan on a regular basis, we're going to do it. Whatever investment or arrangement, we want to bring this to a much, much higher level on the Kirtan side. Thank you very much. Can everyone please unmute and say Hare Krishna?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Rama.
Hare Rama.
Rama Hare Krishna.
Hare Rama. Hare Krishna.
Manchakopdrishcha Kripasnvevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Thank you so much, everybody. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much.
Premanande Haribol. Haribol.
Haribol, Haribol,
Hari Bol.